Hello, everyone, and welcome back to SUSECON 2024 in Berlin. I'm Berlin. I'm joined by Colin from Krumware. Can you introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm Colin. I'm the CEO and founder of Krumware. I like to say I'm a technical founder, I guess, though. I'm a practicing software developer. I work with the CNCF. I'm a co-chair of the platforms working group at the CNCF. We've been using SUSE products in practice and helping customers adopt those tools in practice themselves for about 7 years. It's been a great relationship, and we're really excited about all the announcements that have been here at SUSECON this week.
Yeah, we just chatted like you're the super user of SUSE
Yeah.
products. And before we start, I want to do a little bit like a side note. My so my grandfather, his name is Krum.
No way.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
So I was like, oh, that's interesting.
It's like serendipitous. Yeah.
Right.
Fate.
I'm quite new at SUSE. I'm just joiner of 2 months.
Okay.
So if I wasn't, but anyway, can you hit me? What's the prime stuff and how you use it and how you actually can you share your story with SUSE?
Yeah, 100%. So we actually got started in the cloud native space about 8 or 9 years ago, back when everyone was trying to figure out what are containers, what is Docker, what is Kubernetes, how are we going to use that for ourselves? And we had a unique situation where the software that we were developing, we couldn't just run in a cloud provider. It couldn't go into AWS or Azure. It needed to be on our customers' servers. And we had an even further unique situation where if we were developing and delivering software to those customers that had their own infrastructure, how could we as providers deliver that software effectively and automate that delivery if we're not in control of the infrastructure? So we ended up actually going down the road of adopting Rancher because we had a few particular customers that we had modernized their applications, developed their next gen cloud native applications, given new development tools and things to their developers. And when it was time to hand over the reins to the infrastructure teams, they said, "What did you just do to me? What did you give me? I don't want this thing. I want IIS. I want Windows. I want, Linux." And so we had to figure out if we're going to give their people the tools that they need, through software, how are we going to enable them, the operators, to run it? And it kind of changed our mindset a little bit. We didn't realize we want to develop cool apps. We want to ship, we want to ship capability. I get all choked up about it, right? We want to ship new capabilities. We want to help their people. But the operators are users too. And if they want to be able to just manage machines, if they want to have observability, if they need security, there are a lot of concerns that they thought that containers, we're going to expose them and give them trouble. And so we said, hey, we need to go find a tool that helps solve those problems and meets them at their needs and their understanding and the way that they want to manage. And that was Rancher. But Rancher had some key tenets, had some core things that when we were selecting different tools, Rancher was just, unashamed about bringing together different open source projects and tools. They were very forward about, here's an app catalog, here's how you can install all these things. It was very non-competitive. It was very cooperative. And we saw some other tools that wanted to be closed and opinionated. And it's great that there's, we're leaning into this slogan. I see a banner off camera that says choice happens. And it was really core to us is if we're trying to give better tools to the people, whether it's the end user or the people creating the applications, if I'm a developer and I want to use a certain IDE, that's core to my experience as a developer. So why would I want to lock myself down? I want something that helps keep that open mindset and facilitates that. And so, over the other tools, we chose Rancher and we pulled Rancher in and gave it to the operators, used it as a teaching tool to give them ClickOps, learn Kubernetes, all these great things. But as you know, I think Rancher was acquired a few years ago by SUSE. So that was a really great thing for us because we're software developers. We have We know how to write the code. We just need the code to get from our machines out to the users so that they can, again, it can make their lives better, right?
Yeah.
But we didn't have excuse me, again, all choked up. We didn't have the machine expertise, the Linux expertise, virtualization, all the different things. So we got pumped. We got super excited and said, now we've got Rancher covered. And now we have all these extra tools and resources at our disposal in the SUSE ecosystem and all the power that comes with that. And it really unlocked our ability to go work with larger enterprises and help more operators kind of make that journey from, business critical infrastructure up to that hyperconverged and virtualization plane. And we're super excited about tools like Harvester, and we can talk about some of that, but really, really excited about the ecosystem. It's all coming together, and I couldn't ask for a better partnership.
And prior our official talk, we chatted a little bit like the things that you're gonna show us in a second, but we talk about platform engineering and your effort there. Can you share some more of that before we jump into?
Yeah, absolutely. Have you heard platform engineering
I was
as
platform
a term?
engineer before platform engineering was a thing. So
I love that. No, that's perfect. No, tell me about that a little bit. In the working groups, we talk a lot about, and I say it a lot. We always want to acknowledge that, platform engineering is not new. The fact that we're talking about it may be new, but it's great because platform engineering and using that term and surfacing that term, it's just creating new conversations, and it's giving us a way to communicate the business value of software development and efficient software development and giving people the right tools. And so now we can actually have these conversations with the owners and the CIOs and the CEOs and pull them into the conversation. So tell me about your experience as a platform engineer before it was platform engineering.
I was platform engineering back in the day. I was at VMware at the time. That's like 6-7 years ago.
Yeah.
And we were building that platform based on Kubernetes. So
okay,
it was like the transition of VMware towards as a service, everything as a service. At that time, there was like nothing, right? And platform engineering was not the term at the time. So we started building that so we can enable all the developers at VMware.
It's perfect.
To actually run everything cloud native and to provide them with all the bundles and all the tooling and all the everything.
Are you aware of the term software factory?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, so, we're going to get along great. Yeah.
So I did that, and I was like, and later on that term came out. Like, God damn, I was platform engineer back then, and it was like, all right, that's cool.
I love it. So I need to get you into the platforms working group so we can talk about this stuff, and we got to pull in William Rizzo and chat about this stuff too. Yeah, he's big into this.
I've done some conversations with Luca Galante also.
Very cool. Yeah.
So
you're just waiting for me to recognize. Yeah, that's funny.
Anyway. Yeah. So can you show us some stuff?
I want to. So let's make sure I'm on the right spot here. Oh, let's back out. So in post, now show the screen. Yeah. So we're working on something at Krum that we call the barn stack is our fun name for it. But we're seeing in platform engineering that stacks are becoming a thing, right? We remember LAMP stack and some of the other software development stacks, and it. Again, just naming them something gave us a way to communicate what we were trying to implement. So, hey, this is going to be a LAMP stack app, right? Now we're seeing this issue in platform engineering where a lot of organizations think I need one platform to rule them all. And that's not the case. In our opinion, what we're seeing is you have diverse teams and you have diverse applications and you have diverse infrastructure. Why are we trying to do all of this consolidation and just force feed people with one specific set of tools? By doing proper platform engineering, we can abstract that away. And by considering for other platform engineers and operators as end users, we can give us an even further abstraction where we can think about having maybe platforms of platforms. We can have a common control plane, maybe a common subset of tools that we deploy. And so the barn stack is a little bit of our take on that. We internally, we're calling this software factory. Would really like to coin that name. I don't know if we can take it away from VMware, but credit to them. But us internally, if we think about it, when we work with our customers, we're trying to help our customers essentially build their software factories. what are the tools, parts, pieces, processes? How are their end users going to use the tools? How do we apply specific languages? What other technologies do we need to bring in? We're kind of a power system integrator to a degree, but we are hands-on code and we are code-led. So if we're developing new products for people, or if we're supporting other software vendors and building integrations for them to bring them into the ecosystem and make them more deployable, right? It kind of, our story kind of comes full circle all the time. Then we can mimic real life with all the different parts, pieces, the software development lifecycle, the supply chain, and it feels like a manufacturing process. So we really like that idea of a factory, but can we make a factory that makes factories? You know, a rep wrap in 3D printing. You know, what does that look like? And I think we're getting very, very close to that world. And so the barn stack for us is Backstage, Argo, Rancher, and NuVector. And it's fun because barn, like cattle, rancher, you know, all these things kind of naturally come together, right? And so the reason we include NuVector in this is because it allows us to be secure by default. And we saw a really interesting presentation from, go look it up later, from Jeff on the AI stack. And it's very important that, you know, our data needs to be protected. And as we look as developers and we've got access to internal data sets, we've got access to maybe a code GPT, you know, we've got, or an internal copilot, right? We're, I think, approaching that age where we need to start internalizing more of the development lifecycle and making that more secure and having it in our enclave, because not everybody anymore, just like developers can't just use Vercel to build an app and ship that. An enterprise might not be able to use that, but there are a lot of tools that make it so easy. How do we provide that level of experience, but inside of an internal enterprise environment? So on our screen, maybe now we show it.
Yeah.
If we cut
I'll
some
do my
things.
best afterwards.
On the screen, I wanted to talk through, and I gave a talk about this yesterday, I wanted to talk through some of the evolution of that and just the thought process and thinking behind that. So what we have on screen here, we have a typical setup. When we install Rancher, Rancher is great at cluster orchestration, right, and container orchestration. We'll install Rancher into a Kubernetes cluster, probably with a Terraform script, right? And then log into Rancher. So a user logs into Rancher and then creates a downstream cluster. When developers are getting started with Kubernetes and orgs are getting started, they'll give developers an access to a cluster, and that's how they give them their private environment and say, go install whatever the heck you want on there. You're welcome. Go do a Kubernetes cluster, right? And so this cluster can start to sprawl. It can get out of hand. And if you have a developer leave who installed a bunch of things, then you don't know what's important, what's not. So the typical evolution that they take after that, right, is they start to take a GitOps approach. And they'll start in that application cluster. So same flow here. I've used Terraform with a predefined set of tools, deployed infrastructure and deployed them into infrastructure. And I've logged into Rancher and deployed a downstream cluster. But maybe I'm rolling out Argo CD, Argo workflows, maybe Fleet, and I hook that up to a collection of repositories, or a repository that has my application definitions, my other tools. That's one of the first steps we see people take as they mature. So that gets rolled out. So Argo will manage and roll out apps, and we can teach developers, hey, just do a pull request. Operators, maybe you are the ones who accept the pull request if I, as a developer, want to match to the cluster, things like that. But there's a next evolution then already where finished viable platform, right? Did you come across that in your other times?
Can you share?
Yeah, certainly. So finished viable platform is the idea that, you know, I want to start with the smallest platform possible. I don't want to bloat it with extra tools. And we see a lot of people trying to, and there's a lot of pioneering. We're seeing people that they'll deploy Fleet or Argo into the cluster, and that's it, right? That's the thinnest possible thing that they can deploy. It also speeds deployment. And then they hook up Argo or Fleet to a repository that contains definitions of tools, but now also clusters and other things there. So with Cluster API, we can do that now. And then So through GitOps, that rolls out our downstream clusters, and then we can use Fleet to pre-populate that cluster with manifests that hook up to its GitHub repositories, right, or Git repositories, and pull the things down. So we're seeing that fun evolution, but I didn't know if you had tried that on your own.
I can give it a try for sure, because it's like cool concept.
Yeah, it's like use Argo to replace Argo.
Yeah.
It's actually, it's really interesting. And we're excited about the evolution. And you can see in the repositories, maybe it's not announcements yet, but you can see where it's going with a lot of the cluster API enhancements and things. And so what we're anticipating, and this applies back to the Barn stack, where when we make that turn and that evolution, we are able to manage subsets of tools this way. So we can leverage a Git repository to define our clusters, and then we can label and classify those clusters and have different collections of tools that roll out to specific clusters. In our case, we need to think about what it means to have an individual cluster as a developer. What tools exist for that developer? What IDEs do they need? What IDEs do they need? But we also need security, and we need to do some enforcement and some guardrails. So we can use things like Kyverno, we can use NewVector, and we can determine, don't let them deploy an app unless they have a security definition, like a NewVector policy file, in the manifest of their Helm. And so by default, they're forced to be secure. But as a platform engineer, it's giving them the tools to think about the code and giving them the guardrails. They can self-serve, they can use their own repos, give them some golden paths, some example repositories to start with, use Backstage to do that. But then that can evolve as well. You seem like you've got a question. Just interrupt me.
No. Yeah. Go ahead.
So I'm really excited about taking the next turn, the next evolution. And this is one of the core things that we're trying to get to. But this idea of like a hub and spoke architecture, if we get a lot of developers and a lot of different teams into, I've got a dev cluster, prod cluster, stage cluster, there starts to become infighting, things start to become unwieldy. But if we're thinking about, at the end of the day, what about virtualized clusters? What about, why can't we just have mini clusters? If in our previous step, we've taken the turn and we've consolidated our tools and we've built in our automations to provide those guardrails and roll those out, it unlocks, the ability to think about a cluster as just this wrapper, this functional wrapper, this protective layer around our apps. And so we can build mini clusters and interconnect them and have our apps be the focal point. And that helps our developers think about, I'm using Kubernetes as software-defined infrastructure, right? I want to expose this, I need an ingress. I want to connect to a service, I use a service, right? All these different things. And so with Backstage, when people implement Backstage, are you familiar with Backstage? Yeah. So Backstage gives developers an application catalog. It allows people to kind of consolidate their standards. It's a great implementation of Backstage. Shout out to Spotify. It's a great implementation excuse project to drive your maturity forward for your developers. But what's stopping us at this point from using Backstage to create a cluster and have that cluster come with all the tools, resources, and things that I need as a developer? So remote code spaces, everything else, there's some great tools and companies we're working with to provide that integrated cluster experience. So we see in the future, let's define all of our clusters, let's define apps and make clusters in our infrastructure a first-class citizen, and let's manage many of those and do it all in a GitOps. So we're doing this in practice, and there's still some things that we're learning, but it's really exciting to see this, multi-cluster idea. And with tools like Harvester, which is giving us the ability to create this like rancher of ranchers and these virtualized clusters, we don't have to do the heavy lifting. We can just use the tool that's already there, and that's Harvester, right? And we can use Rancher as the gateway and the access point for all of the developers. And that's the final. So like the big question is, and maybe as you're learning, what types of users do you hear about using Rancher? Is it's operators? Do you see anybody else using it though? It's been interesting that, when you think about it from a platform standpoint, do you see a world where, well, I'm asking leading questions. I don't want to ask a lead question. Is should the developers have access to Rancher? I guess is the big question. In your opinion, honest opinion,
Personal?
because then we can
No.
adjust. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Exactly.
No.
Exactly. No, I don't want them in Rancher. Why? So why shouldn't they be in Rancher?
They shouldn't care about Rancher at all.
Mhm.
Like they should care. Developers should care about the end result and how they can deploy faster and more secure, not how it's deployed, where it's deployed. So that's
I agree,
yeah.
100%.
It's not
Yeah.
like we don't want to allow them access. They shouldn't need that access. They shouldn't
Right.
care about that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we see that all the time. But the biggest challenge as a developer is knowing where to go, knowing what tools you need access to. As I switch from project to project, if I need to, use my local Kubernetes tool to switch my kube context to jump into a different thing, or switch to a different dashboard, or visualize something, or if I had to jump between cloud providers, I had to learn Azure and AWS and GCP and just jump around because of the project or the customer, I'm screwed. I'm lost. I'm going to spend 2 hours ramping myself up to work on something for 5 minutes, to then have to switch to another project to spend 2 hours, and it's crazy. But Rancher can be, we think it is, as you build maturity and as a developer, you'll take on more of the infrastructure development side and kind of grow into that with the right protective guardrails and training. And that's what we used Rancher for. But, I really see it kind of evolving. And so I want to show that a little bit. So this is kind of what you're talking about a little bit. And this is messy on purpose. I'm not going to show all of it, but right.
I was going to use the chance to invite you to one of the Rancher lives, so we
yeah.
can discuss that more if you want. So if you can just before we wrap up,
I'll wrap this sucker up. So this is kind of like the end point, right? Developers, DevSecOps people, maintainers, SRE operators, they all need access to different parts of the infrastructure and different tools and different portals. And the big challenge is they all need to understand how to get there. And today they have to use these individual tools, and they dive down into one and come up for air, and dive down into another, come up for air. It's challenging. But with Rancher extensions, right, what we're actually doing is we're able to allow the developers, SecOps, SRE, the different users to access Rancher and use Rancher as their gateway. If I have access to a cluster, which Rancher can check and have the permissions and the control, if I have access to a cluster, then I can access directly into my tools, or we can still provide direct access to those tools. But I can use Rancher as a home base now. I can use it as a development portal. And so we're building extensions to provide access to Backstage, to launch some of those clusters from Backstage. So I can move to Backstage if I want, or do it from here. I can provide access to Argo, or I can do it in Rancher and just have just enough overlap. So we can use Rancher as the gateway and the starting point. And we're really, really, really excited to release these. We've got one out already. We call our app launcher. So for non-developers,
I'm going to use the opportunity right now to invite you to the Rancher Live. Sorry, I had to do that.
No, that's great.
I really wanted to discuss that more in details and like a longer, more extended session. So
chop it up anyway.
Yeah, no, I think that format that we do right now is like, it's not suitable to cover everything that we want to cover. So, all right. Thank you very much, Colin, for
thank you guys.
Yeah, it was very cool.
Yeah.
See you next time, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.